Board of Commissioners of Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. Tonight is October 12th, and we are moving into open session from closed session. Do you want to do a roll call to call us to order, Mr.?
Yes, Commissioner Higgins,
Present.
Commissioner Benson,
Present.
Commissioner Newman,
Here.
Commissioner Coleman, and President Dale.
Here. So, Pledge of Allegiance. Aaron, would you lead us?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this point in our agenda, we take public comment on items not agendized on this agenda. If you have comments on items not agendized tonight, please step forward, give us your name and where you're from, and fill us in.
3 minutes. Are we going to report on closed session?
Oh, Rob,
Yeah, there was no reportable action taken during tonight's closed session.
Ryan, you let me do that. All right, anybody care to speak on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to the consent calendar.
So move. Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of passing the consent calendar, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Moving on to item 9A, correspondence received.
We did not receive any formal correspondence. That's reportable to the board.
Executive Director's report.
A couple of things is so in the first place is I just wanted to really thank the Yurok tribe in particular. They invited me to come up to their community meeting this Saturday, and so I was able to give a presentation to the tribal council and the tribal membership at their annual meeting, and it was an honor for me personally to be invited up there. We were the only ones that weren't staff that were allowed. It was a closed meeting, and so we presented on the offshore wind project, and we were treated very respectfully, and absolutely had a great time at lunch and met a lot of really good people there, and they were kind of interested to hear about a lot of the things that we're doing in Humboldt Bay that aren't directly related to the offshore wind industry over lunch. But anyway, I wanted to thank them. The second thing is I next Wednesday, there's a new colonel of the Army Corps of Engineers is coming up, and Stu Townsley, who is the civilian executive director of the Corps for San Francisco region, is coming up, and so we're going to give them a tour of our properties to talk about the channel modifications. They're looking at he told me that they're going to go out and take a look at the North and South Jetty, and that they may be able to get a little bit more money to do a little bit more improvements out on the North and South Jetty. As there's a backlog of dredging of the inner channel and in the entrance, and so really part of this communication of getting them to tune up and keep the channels open just for our normal everyday commerce to get our maritime industry in there, and so it's a really good opportunity for us to meet the colonel and also the civilian heads of the Army Corps. And when I was talking to them today, they just really wanted to thank, the board for all the advancements that we've done together with the Army Corps of Engineers over the last few years, because there's been a lot of improvements that have happened in communications and a lot of improvements of Humboldt. On that arena, there is the Army Corps of Engineer and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, November 4th, or is it November 4th or 2nd, Rob? November 2nd, the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA is doing a public meeting And it's going to be on the proposed nearshore dredge placement. And so in other words, what happens right now when the Army Corps of Engineers dredges primarily the entrance channel, they take that 3 miles offshore to Hoods. The resource agencies, the Coastal Commission, Fish and Wildlife, a lot of the regulatory agencies have been asking them to do a nearshore placement of some of that dredge material so that you could get beach replenishment to help out the dunes on the North Jetty. And so they're looking to do the public, some of the public meetings for that. And so that's going to be on November 2nd. And so you should pay attention to
What
that.
time?
5 p.m. in the Warfinger Bay Room.
And so then the last thing I wanted to comment on is that on last Friday, I gave a tour to the water board staff, and 3 of their board members. We gave a tour of the Samoa Peninsula properties. Wanted to thank Taylor Mariculture in particular. They gave a great overview of their operations at RMT2. We showed them where the Nordic Aquafarm site was and all the work that the district and our partners have been doing to clean up the contamination and the other areas. And then we also toured the new terminal project and kind of focused on the Spartina eradication project that we're working with Caltrans and the Wiyot tribe on. And lastly, we talked about the dredging of Woodley Island Marina that's taking place now, and kind of as a regulatory agency that does permits on every one of those projects. It was kind of a good overview for the water board staff and the commission to get a hands-on look at our projects. That's all I have to report.
Thanks, Larry. Staff?
Sure. So at this point, the only thing I'm going to report on tonight is dredging, but dredging is occurring in Woodley Island as we speak. We are up against a window. This is current active dredging at the breakwater as of this morning. The dredge operator will move to the U.S. Coast Guard tomorrow and possibly Saturday, and then return to us Sunday. Sunday is the last day of our actual allowable dredge cycle. However, we submitted for an extension due to another extenuating or a number of extenuating circumstances. And so far, we have to have clearance from 3 agencies, the 4th being the master permit of the Army Corps of Engineers. And so far, we have 2 of the 3 agencies have committed to it. So we're waiting just for one more response. Coast Guard was successful in getting a 5-day extension. We've asked for 240 hours or 20 12-hour working days, not to exceed November 15th. So we're optimistic, but we don't have that as of yet. That's our report.
So this past, what was that? Friday?
Thursday.
The water, what was
Thursday.
Thursday? The water board unanimously approved Nordic's outfall permit. So that's another step towards that project being fully permitted. Last night I attended a fisheries communication plan with Vineyard and RWE, who have collectively released a plan on how they're going to communicate with fisheries related to their offshore wind farms. I'll be attending the American Association of Port Authorities conference on October 23rd. Been asked to present about the wind project on the main stage, and then that one Director Lotter already discussed.
Nordic and the Coastal Commission was like slated for passage in July, and forgive my ignorance on the subject.
There are
They still pending.
3 coastal development permits for that project. One was approved by the county and then appealed to the Coastal Commission. One is for the outfall in the Coastal Commission's jurisdiction. One is for the intake. All 3 are potentially they can go to the November meeting. The staff is still figuring out
Thank
whether
you.
that'll work. If it doesn't,
So they're moving.
yes.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, district council,
Nothing for me tonight.
nothing. Commissioner reports. Patrick, start us off.
Oh, I was in Rochester, New York, and there's nothing like a vacation to make you appreciate home. New York is beautiful, but and it's got rich history, but it doesn't have the wild. And that's what really calls me. You know, I just want to comment on the meeting on 11/2. if we were able to use a suction dredge and to transport material, we could combat climate change around the perimeter of the bay. And also we could see the ocean offshore where the North Jetty blocks eel sediment, so the beach is advancing. And so for them to take the dredge stuff and instead to put it into the littoral cell there for littoral drift and to fill it with barges instead of running out to the hoods, that's a good thing. But it would be a better thing if we could lower the cost. That bucket and dredge that you're looking at there, that's the dirtiest way to collect sediment. It resuspends everything. It gives eggs more of a problem. It has many downsides, but because we've had a permit like that for 10 years, then we can keep doing that. But we need to be able to advance to using the suction dredge, and we're now doing enough mitigation along the shores of Humboldt Bay, particularly just upstream of 101, to where and the Nordic project has given us a lot of data on the long fin smelt, which has been our impediment. Going into the future, you want to move mud out of this harbor, you want navigable waterways, we have to get off of expensive dumping it all in the hoods. And so we're stuck in a bad practice. We're on the cusp of change. When the studies were done to test the last time we pumped sediment off the beach, there was extensive studies and they found absolutely no detriment. The sediment coming from the bay is not like the sediment from the shores of San Francisco Bay that's laden with all kinds of things. It's just the stuff that came out of Freshwater Creek and off the hills. And so we shouldn't be afraid of using a slurry to pump it onto, off the beach, but into the ocean. And whether the Army Corps allows dredge fill, to be dumped, or they take the sediment and dump it into that littoral cell, or we pump it far enough offshore so it isn't a nuisance. It's a good thing. It's needed, and it's not pernicious. And if fuel keeps going up, pretty soon we just won't maintain the harbor. And so that's a decision the community has to make. I think that the decision against the soundest practice has been not either scientifically valid or logical in its stance. So, I digressed.
About 10 minutes ago. Mr.
Well, you
Benson.
could have cut me off. Thank you for not doing so. That would have been a little tense.
Mr. Benson.
Yeah, I just want to report to the commission that I was invited as the representative for Division 4, which includes Eureka and the Small Bridge all the way up to the mouth to attend an event put on by Which Way the Wind and by the Veterans for Peace organization relative to the Golden Rule coming into our harbor. On Friday, it was at the Women's Club in Samoa, and it was a lovely event. And so there was a welcome sort of in advance of the Golden Rule coming. It's getting some much needed TLC down in Richmond, which should be here by Friday. And for those of you who don't know much about the Golden Rule, it was built in 1958 in Costa Rica to go to the Marshall Islands as the first. This is way before Greenpeace, as the first vessel to do environmental actions around nuclear work. And so it's still a peace vessel, and it is anti-militarism and anti-nuclear proliferation, and that's really what it exists for. And it just finished an 11,000-mile journey, starting up at the headwaters of the Mississippi River and going all the way up the East Coast and into the Erie Canal and into the Great Lakes. Over 100 ports of call, 400 events, much like the one we just had here. And one of the things that we promised as a harbor district is safe harbor, and we provide that for vessels passing by or vessels in distress. And I reflected that at that meeting that I'm not sure we can offer safe harbor to the Golden Rule in the way they perceive safe harbor. We in 1980 we closed a nuclear plant. One of the things that this community can be proud of. Yet we still have 67 tons of spent nuclear rods at the independent spent fuel storage site at Humboldt Bay. generating station and the 44 feet project that I've participated in with Jen Marlowe and Alec Brown has set 44 feet at the height of a tsunami that would turn us into Fukushima, and we have 1,300 feet of erosion along Gunner Point, and so it may not take a tsunami, it may just simply be undermined over time. And I'm not trying to be, reactionary or fear mongering. I'm just trying to just, give people an update that we may not be the safest place in terms of nuclear, the legacy of nuclear power for the Golden Rule. They may not consider it safe harbor, but let me just ask. I think there's an opportunity for us to make a proclamation about this peace vessel, which, by the way, sunk in this bay, and right, not 200 yards from us, and it was raised and restored, and has been sent back out to sea. It's been birthed and rebirthed many times since 1958, and so I would like to have put on the next agenda. Ask that a proclamation be considered. I have some draft language around that, and I'd also like this harbor to continue to offer a free slip to the Golden Rule for the time that it's here. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that we've done a proclamation for the Golden Rule
have
and it
we?
was repaired here,
Okay,
but I could be wrong. Is there a way to check that, Mindy? Thank you. Commissioner Newman.
In the last, 3 weeks or so, we've had 3 cruise ships that I participated in as a line boat operator for Z&Z Marine Services. It's always very exciting and scary. And anyway, I really want to thank Mindy for doing such a great job with her cruise ship organization. And just great to see the cruise ships come and go, adding tonnage to Humboldt Bay's maritime rating, or however they call it. And our bar pilot apprentices were able to go out on all the trips, and we're getting closer and closer to having more new bar pilots from Humboldt Bay. I commented at the water board meeting a week ago,
Thursday. Last
Thursday. Anyway,
Or Monday.
whatever it was very interesting to see how carefully the discharge was permit was deliberated by the board, and their staff did a really good job. Beyond that, just want to mention that commercial fishing at Humboldt Bay is not doing well. And one of the few fisheries that I've been involved in for the last summer is the sablefish fishery. And although the limits are going up, the prices are going down, and I just want to get it out there that commercial fishing is really in hard times right now, and hope it turns
Fixed
around.
pack charters too. I mean, with early closures of the rockfish season and halibut season and no salmon.
Well, what
season.
recently happened was the quillback rockfish, that's more inshore fishery fish that has been concentrated on because of the rules for the last decade or so. Now the inside's been closed and the outside's open. The outside was closed for the previous decade. So it just a lot going on in recreational and commercial fisheries, and a lot of it isn't good. So that's my report.
Are we gonna have a crab season?
Hope so. I got my tags today.
Domoic acid?
Well, I hope I didn't get that. I got tags.
You didn't get any Domoic acid? We're getting close. All right.
Well, Crescent City actually did their first round of testing, and there was no domoic acid found in the first sample.
That's what I
So
heard.
that's good. Our test is this week. So
So I don't have a whole lot to report. I was a part of a committee that traveled to Washington DC this last week, along with Labor and Environment California, to pursue funding for our dock. It was interesting. DC is I mean, it's a dysfunctional place to start with. Put a change in speakership and a lack of funding for government. It makes things really interesting. But we did meet with everybody. We were well represented, and I thought got good feedback, good comments from staff, from a variety of legislators. I believe that as a whole, this entire West Coast is supportive of our project and of offshore wind. Organizing the squirrels is our next task, and it's basically, there's a lot of organizing that needs to go on to get this done, and I think there's a lot of people working on it very hard. But labor was there in force, as was staff from our California environmental organization. So it was fun. It was a good time. It was tough getting home. You can fly in and out of Arcata 100 times, and all you remember is the one time that they've canceled all the flights in San Francisco. And so that's just about what happened. We ended up driving home, Stephen and I, and we were at the gate, which is always fun, sitting at the gate in San Francisco waiting to come to Humboldt, because you always know somebody. And so there was a couple of little contingents that we all rented cars and we all drove home kind of together, but we actually picked up a passenger, and it was a good conversation on the way home. Stephen and I were sick of talking to each other after 3 days anyways. Other than that, not a lot else to report. So I can't think of anything else there. So I'm going to move on to unfinished business. Considering to adopt resolution 2023-18, amending the salary schedule for middle management, unclassified employees of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District.
Second.
Staff recommends that the board adopt this resolution. Larry, you want to talk to us about it?
Just briefly, is that as the board knows, is that at your last meeting, you approved the collective bargaining agreement with our union employees, with the operating engineers. And you heard earlier today before closed session that the OE3 representative was here and thanked the board for a successful bargaining agreement. We entered into a 3-year agreement.
We actually thank you, Larry, for being a good participant and a good listener.
I was going to say, tell that to my wife that I'm a good listener, but I won't say that. And so tonight before you is basically the mid-management salary schedule, which matches the bargaining agreement with the employees. And so essentially what we would be doing is there's a $1.50 per hour retroactive to July 1st. Then we're switching insurance plans. Able to renegotiate insurance plans, which has a savings for the district. And as part of that renegotiation of insurance, we'll be giving $2 per hour increase when the insurance goes into effect. And then beginning on July 1st, 2024, there would be an additional $1.25 per hour, and then an additional $1.25 per hour starting July 1st, 2025 for a 3-year bargaining agreement. And so this would be for the mid-management staff. And then just as a footnote is that the senior management and your executive director are not covered under those salary schedules. Those are all done through the individual contracts that are negotiated. And so with that, thank you for the motion. I'm available for any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board?
I just want to thank staff for providing the salary schedule in great detail, so that we see what that $1.50 an hour or $2 an hour or $1.25 an hour, what that means in terms of steps and ladders for union employees. Thank you.
We are very lucky to have the motivated staff that we have. And so it's very good, and I appreciate my fellow commissioners negotiating in good faith to make sure that they feel adequately compensated, and I think it's a good thing. And working man makes a little more money. Working woman too.
Any more comments from the board? Anyone from the audience care to comment on resolution 2023-18? No comments. Seeing none, it's a resolution, so we'll have a roll call.
Yes, Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Benson.
Aye.
And President Dale.
Yes. All right, moving on, new business. Item A, receive status update regarding Humboldt Bay Offshore Wind Heavy Lift Marine Terminal Project. Rob, do you have a good presentation for us?
I do. I think, well, let's start with this slide here.
Awesome.
Yeah, there. It's like great. This presentation is bound to make some people grumpy, starting with you, President Dale. I think that you're gonna find this presentation to be too long. Others are gonna think that it's not gonna cover everything that everyone wants, but I promise I did my best. Find the balance here. I
Thank you.
just wanted to open with the acknowledgement that.
Actually, it looks like Leroy.
All right. So the written staff report provided several pages of project backgrounds, and I wish we had time to go into details of the project. So some member of the audience may find this presentation frustrating to assume the base level knowledge. This is really a presentation to you, the board.
Oh, don't be like that.
I didn't do that.
Grumpy ghost.
Yes, so if you do not have a strong background in this project, or you're not well informed on what's been going on, this is a status report, but if you'd like to catch up, you can go to the Humboldt Bay Harbor District's website. Click on Harbor and Port, and then you'll see offshore wind terminal projects, and you can click on that. There's a whole lot of information there, including a link to a YouTube video that's an hour long, and that can catch you up. All right, so let's just review briefly project objectives. So one of the primary objectives of this project is to contribute to solving climate change and sea level rise by supporting state and federal goals for offshore wind. It's a big, ambitious objective, but it's important that that is the underlying foundation of why we're doing this. We're also seeking to clean up and redevelop a blighted site. We're seeking maritime manufacturing jobs and economic development in Humboldt Bay. And we are seeking to provide revenue to the needs of Humboldt Bay, including there's a lot of deferred maintenance of facilities throughout the day, docks and all kinds of bay marine related infrastructure. We're seeking to fund conservation and restoration projects throughout the watershed of Humboldt Bay, recreation projects, and environmental education. And so any revenue generated by this project to the Humboldt Bay Harbor District will go back into Humboldt Bay. And there are other objectives outlined in our CEQA notice of preparation. Some topics not covered in the staff reports. Since we released the staff report this past Friday, I've gotten a lot of feedback. Hey, why didn't it include this? Why didn't it include that? So I'll just briefly identify a couple of things. The CEQA notice of preparation, scoping comments. NOP related stakeholder meetings are underway. We had our first NOP scoping meeting in July and a second one in August. That one was neighborhood specific on the Sonoma Peninsula. The NOP public comment period closed on October 25th, more than twice the length that we were obligated to keep that open. And district received 108 comment letters. That website that I showed earlier has a copy of all 108 of those letters. So anyone is welcome to read those. And it's important to emphasize that the purpose of NOP comment letters is to help the district and our project team identify potential impacts that need to be analyzed in the project. There is no requirement, and we do not have any budget to respond to each one of those comment letters. And say it took an hour to respond to each one, that's 2.5, 3 weeks worth of full-time work. We were to have an hour-long meeting with each one of those individuals, 2.5 hours or 2.5 weeks worth of work. We don't have the budget to do that. It's really not the purpose of NOP to start a conversation. So we have taken all of those NOP letters and we are in the process of categorizing each comment in each letter, because most letters had more than one comment, by CEQA category, breaking each letter up into individual components, and then creating comment clusters and sharing those clusters with the subject matter experts for each CEQA category. So there are comments related to air quality and to noise and to all of them in various CEQA categories. To be aware that that is well underway. And several tribes submitted comment letters. As I'll explain in a moment, we are actively working with tribal governments. And so with them, we are communicating with them about their MFP comment letters. So again, you can find the project here by clicking on that link, and you can find all 108 comment letters on that site. Another thing that people have brought up is, why aren't you working with tribal governments? So we are participating in ongoing meetings and conversations with 7 different tribal governments. We have met with all of them, and we have many more meetings scheduled. These are ongoing and confidential processes, so we can't disclose details of our conversations with tribal governments unless that tribe explicitly wants us to share their communications. The public does have access to a few of the tribe's NLP comment letters. Any tribe that submitted officially NLP comment letters are in that list. So if you want to see what those tribes disclose publicly, you can see it there. All of our conversations today have been candid, positive, productive, and educational. It's been honestly an honor to work with these 7 tribes and to learn from them. Topic of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples is a topic that several tribes addressed and asked us to learn more about and to address in the project. So we received literature from tribes, and we're in the process of self-education on the topic. There's a lot to learn. We're meeting with tribes and learning from them. And we have received a list of MMIP topics that we've been asked to consider incorporating into our project, and we are actively evaluating those requests. And can say that most, if not all, of those requests made by tribes to date can be accommodated, and we're taking strong measures to prevent MMIP sexual harassment and trafficking. To give a little bit of context, there's been a persistent rumor that we are going to have tens of thousands of employees on site. It's going to disrupt the housing market and cause social chaos in our community. So we have done modeling on the peak and average maximum number of employees that will be on site at any given moment during both construction and operations. And right now, the modeling is showing us that during construction, the peak number of people that will be on site at any given moment is less than 200. There's also, and that's if all 3 phases are constructed simultaneously. We don't have any plans right now to construct all 3 phases simultaneously. We have a grant application in just for 1 phase. So that would be 150 people maximum on site at any given moment. The yellow boxes, we don't have the modeling yet for, that's operations, but so far, from what we understand, it's going to be about the same.
Isn't it the case that they've committed to hiring locally? So then those a number of those workers might actually not be imported from somewhere else, so they're already in our community.
Yeah, so the project labor agreement has a 20% local hiring preference, I believe is the way that that's phrased. So yes, at least 20% of those numbers would be people that already live here.
Okay.
And the estimated average is even lower, 50 to 100 people on site in given moments. And Eureka, the city of Eureka has 1,800 hotel rooms. So we're talking about less than 10% of the hotel rooms in the city of Eureka being able to easily absorb that. CAL FIRE periodically has 50 to 100 people in our community staying in our hotels in fires. So that's just some context, but that's still 50 to 200 people coming into our community. So we will definitely take strong measures to prevent MMIP and sexual harassment trafficking. To give you just a quick update on some recently published studies. Earlier this year, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management released its California Floating Offshore Wind Regional Force Assessment. It identified that Humboldt Bay is critical to the state reaching its offshore wind goals, and that only Humboldt Bay and the Port of Long Beach are capable of doing the project that we're planning on doing, and that both projects will be needed simultaneously for the state to reach its goals. So we are not competing with Long Beach. Long Beach and Humboldt projects both are necessary if the state is going to reach its goals for renewable energy. Then that was January. Then in July, State Lands Commission came out with their own study. It says effectively the same thing, but goes into much greater detail. So 100 pages long. It's a really incredibly technical report. And then less than 30 days ago, the National Renewable Energy Lab did their own study that came to the same conclusions. Green terminal. District's been working on this topic since March 2022. We have budget and a contract to complete the technical studies. We've been in communication with Crowley about this topic. It is something that is very important to us. Staff's committed to developing a green terminal. To do otherwise would be illogical, since this project is about addressing climate change. We recommend that the board adopt a resolution committing to a green terminal or a net zero terminal by a certain year. It's very technically complicated. And I don't want us to ever have false promises. So I don't think it's a good idea for us to commit to something that's technically impossible, but I recommend that we look at that. And we can bring more information to you about this topic in the future. Project phasing. This was presented to you in your staff report. Unfortunately, there was an old page in there. This is the page that belongs. So phase 0 is the stuff that has to happen before we can build the terminal. It's effectively mitigation, utilities, and roads. Phase 1 is what we're planning on building right now with our mega grant application, which I'll talk about in a moment. Phases 2 and 3 and 4 are future phases. So the phasing map corresponds to the schedule and the budget that I'll show you in a moment. Phase 0 is mitigation, utilities, access, things that have to be constructed or completed prior to construction. Right now, we're considering manufacturing buildings as a phase 4 beyond phase 3. And phases 0 and 1 are the only phases scheduled to be constructed right now that you'll see in the schedule. So if we break this down, there is the project that's presented in the NOP. And this is phase 0. So 0A is the eelgrass mitigation, 0B is the marine mitigation, terrestrial mitigation, the North Road. That is the 2.5 megawatt ground mounted solar, and then the South Road and utility access. Then if we break it down again, this is phase 1. 1A being the upland yard and 1B being the 800-foot terminal. And 1A may be smaller than that, but that's the largest. So this right here is what we have applied for in the mega grant application. So that's about 1/3 of the total project area. That is phases 2 and 3 and the buildings being 4. So those we do not have any plans right now for construction. Project funding and budgets. We have a couple of pending grants out there that you approved the submittal of. You've got the Port Infrastructure Development Program submitted to the federal MARAD agency requesting $8+ million with a $2 million match from the CEC that we already have submitted in April. We should hear about that. Well, last year they made those announcements at the end of October, so very soon. The mega grants, Federal Department of Transportation was the grant agency. We asked for over $400 million. We committed $6 million of our CEC grants, and Crowley committed $415 million. We submitted that in August and should hear at the end of this year. And just got an email today where they're starting to ask technical questions, which is a really good sign. So that PDIP, those funds would cover the remaining soft costs like engineering and design, whereas the mega grant would fund construction of phase 0 and phase 1. This is kind of a map of all of our various funding sources and our expenses. So just to break this down to make it easy to understand, we've got some district funds that have gone into district staffing, direct expenses like going to conferences and consultants. We are no longer funding consultants with district staff or district funds, I should say, and direct expenses. We are no longer covering the district funds. So right now, district funds are only going to district staff. State Lands Commission grant went to consultants. That's fully expended, as was the Headwaters Fund grant. And that's fully expended. California Energy Commission $10 million grants going into district staffing, expenses, consultants, and most of it is set aside as a matching for other grants. These dashed lines mean this is pending, so the Port Infrastructure Development Program is going up there to those costs. The mega grants, the construction, green port strategy, community benefit program, would probably match to that grant, also the construction, green port strategy, and community benefit program, and then future grants. So that's how the whole picture fits together. So then you should be asking, what if we don't get those grants that are in the dashed lines? The state lands is already expended. So the top, those are our soft costs, and down here is our construction costs. So what if we don't get those dashed line grants that are needed? If we don't get the PDIP, the mega grants actually got a built-in backup plan, so we would cover the soft costs already. So it's not a problem if we get the mega grant, but not the PDIP grant. If we get the PDIP, but not the mega grant, then the consequence would be that probably would have nothing to match against. Let's just get rid of future grants for conversation. So if we get PDIP and not mega, what would happen is we would have a fully permitted, designed project that's shovel ready, but no identified construction costs, which isn't a bad place to be, to have a shovel ready project. If we don't get the PDIP grant, then our plan is to use what we are currently setting aside as the matching funds from the CPC grant. And so we'd have to expend all of that, and we'd have a shovel ready project with no identified construction funds and no matching funds for future grants. When it's not ideal, not optimal, but still a really good position to be in to have a shovel ready project. So our plan A is to receive both grants and proceed to construction and schedule. I'll show you in a moment. Plan B is to receive the mega grant, but not PDIP. It's effectively the same thing. Plan C is to receive the PDIP, but not the mega, then we'll shovel ready, but we need to find construction funds. Plan D, to receive neither, we divert our CEC match to the soft costs and we have a shovel ready project. So we're currently traveling down path A, but we have backup plans. Budget status. Project budget is not the same as construction cost estimates. So what I'm talking about with this is the budget that's going to our design and permitting. We're on budget. Reimbursements from the State Land Commission is complete. Reimbursements from the California Energy Commission has been timely and easy to process. All is going well. Project schedule. This 2-page document was submitted to you. The first page got scrambled a little bit in the first submittal, so we did a supplemental, that was provided to you. 2 pages long. The bottom page has this key, so let's just go over this for a second. So you've got stars that represent board actions. Green are completed actions. Red are future board actions. Then there's this series of codes here. These stand for task authorization 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are kind of amendments to our contract with Moffett Nickel. And each one of those identifies the source of funds. So that one is currently underway and due to you by the end of February. And I'll go over and talk about all those deliverables on. And then the M is the mega grant and the funding for construction, with the red line being major milestones. So you can see that the permitting is scheduled to be complete in early 2025 and the construction to begin in mid-2026. Happy to go over this schedule in detail. I've condensed it here together. If you want to talk about it, it's kind of tiny. But here's a summary. Future board actions, community benefit program, annual awards, authorization of those award or other grant applications. You will be seeing 3 different district permits filing for approval and the approval of 3 different permits. We have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility plan for your approval, a green terminal plan, master eelgrass mitigation project, construction bid documents. Yep. And approval of wind terminal construction bidding RFPs, approval of Baywide master plan offshore wind, and then well, the plan has been for you to be approving both the draft environmental impact report, a final impact report, but the state just made a motion that it is possible that the State Lands Commission could become a secret lead agency by the time we're done with this. So you will be having at least 19 official board actions in the next 5 years in this project. And that doesn't include the project, labor agreement, leasing, or other related board actions. So just really about permitting to design 19 actions. Muffin Nickel contract status, task orders 1 through 3 is what we are currently operating under with our contracts. Task order 1 and 2 are complete, fully delivered. Task order 3, by February 24, you will be receiving project concept design drawings, visual simulations, 50% design and cost estimates. 9 special studies, which I'll show you in the next slide. Master project description for CEQA and permits. Draft and final CEQA initial study, draft environmental impact section. Submitted with 6 different permit applications, terrestrial and biological, wetland mapping. Here are the permits that will be submitted. Oh, and there's the special studies. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Project design status. So this map's being updated. The wharves have been relocated slightly, and we've got this multidisciplinary design status kind of circling in on permit level design. So just as an example of what I'm talking about, looking at this graphic here, on the left, you've got various elevations with 0 being low tide. So you've got mean sea level at 3.7 feet, high tide or mean high water. Highest astronomical tide, right? These various levels of the levels of the bay at various tides. That highest astronomical tide at 8.4. Could we put our wharf and say its elevation is 9 feet, right? That's above high tide, good enough. But you've got sea level rise to plan for. Oops. So we need to raise the wharf elevation a little bit. So we have a team working on looking at all the sea level rise modeling. How high can we raise our wharf? Well, if we put it at 15 feet, which is what our current target is, what that means is that at high tide, the wharf would be 8 feet above the water level. At low tide, the wharf is 15 feet above the wharf level. At some point, if the wharf gets too high, in the first 10 years, you won't be able to use it at low tide. So the marine operations team is telling the sea level rise team, don't raise it too high. The sea level rise team is saying, well, we've got to raise it, right? So you've got these different things that you've got to balance. So this multidisciplinary design process is underway for sea level rise, stormwater teams like, well, if you do that, then this is a problem. And the geotech and the ecology team comes in. Right now we're spinning around in circles and it's frustrating. I can tell you from 20 years of experience working on tribal senior housing projects, trail projects, this part of the project always happens where all the different designs teams start swirling around in circles. We're in a really good spot right now. From experience, I can tell you things are really starting to come together and we're starting to eliminate impossibilities. So if we were to have a community stakeholder, they would have been very frustrated and disgusted with the process up to this point. Because it's just a lot of iteration and you have to eliminate options and identify things that are impossible. We're coming up on a part where we are now starting to get to the point where we can analyze real impacts of the project, talk to the community and tribes and the operations team, and come up with genuine alternatives analysis instead of having ideas that end up being impossible. So the project's in a good place when it comes to this. Community benefit considerations. I wish I could have another half an hour to talk to you about this. So, there are inherent things built into the project for community benefits. You've got climate change and sea level rise, cleaning up the site, the enhanced infrastructure finance district that's built into the county's process means that millions of dollars will be reinvested back into the community for transportation and other infrastructure projects. Project inherently includes other community benefits because the Harbor District's exclusive purpose is about benefits to Humboldt Bay. Some other things to consider is that CEQA and all of these permits are binding enforceable legal mechanisms that cover most of what various stakeholders have already asked this district to do. Then there's been talk about the resolution that you passed concerning offshore wind developments, resolution 2305, that talks about community benefit agreements. That's really referencing the community benefit agreements for the offshore wind farms. We can talk about that more if you'd like, but the offshore wind farms at most will invest 25% of their revenue into the local community through community benefit agreement. 100% of our project revenue that we receive in our leases will go back to Humboldt Bay. So it's not an apples to apples comparison to compare the offshore wind lease community benefit agreements to our community benefit agreements. happy to talk about that more if you'd like. And then we've got the mega grants community benefit program built in. So part of that grant program, we asked for $6 million. And we'd like that to be the beginning of the fund. We'd like to see that fund build. Other agencies, other grants, local foundations, other undetermined sources can invest into that fund so that our community benefit program grows. What the community benefit program is I'm not going to read all these words, but it's a competitive program of grants issued by the board, by you on an annual basis to benefit the Wiat tribe, Blue Lake Rancheria, Bear River Rancheria, tribally owned lands, businesses, projects sanctioned by tribal governments, residents and businesses, neighborhood associations and NGOs within 3.5 miles of the project in the Samoa Peninsula, including Manila, commercial fishing enterprises based in the Bay, aquaculture, recreational users of Humboldt Bay. So those are the beneficiaries of the grant program. And preference is going to be given to grant applications that do a lot of the things people have been asking for. We've been working on this for quite a while as well, our secondary grant activities. In the interest of time, I'm gonna just zoom through that, but there's a lot there. We're already planning on this community benefit program, seeking funding for it, and hoping others can contribute to that fund. So those first bullets there, the things that I covered, the other 6 bullets are things I wanted to get to, but didn't have time, and I imagine you would have run out of patience with me by this point. So I recommend that we do these kind of updates on this project periodically, every 3 months or so, or as frequently as you recommend. That's my are you grumpy? Is that too?
No, that was great, Rob. Thanks.
It's a great report, and as
Yeah.
a member of the board, it's not a member of the subcommittee, great to get this information. And around that restrictions, we don't get all the information, so I really
appreciate these updates.
Questions, comments?
Questions and comments. I have many questions, but let me just start with one. Yes, thank you for the report, and I would love to see, I would just love to see this be a monthly event. I think things are moving quickly, and I think the desire of the community to be communicated to about this, and I think not only the community's desire, but our need to communicate really clearly so that we don't have misinformation persist. I think it's worth considering speaking to this issue on a monthly basis of community agreements, and I know we're playing with those words from community benefit agreement to community agreements to some, not everyone in the community will think the same benefit is a benefit to them. So just community agreements, in general. I guess I'm, just in that whole presentation, for Humboldt, I think that I'm just, what I don't see in the phasing, I'm really seeing an operational and construction phasing and permitting and CEQA. And I guess what I'm looking for, seeing more cogently in future reports, and because I know these things are still evolving, so I'm not going to hold your feet to specificity about community agreements that we haven't fully developed, that are still being presented to us by community groups like Port Hub and tribes. But I'm looking at some point to not too far away to get more specificity about these. Just, for example, I won't go into the details, but Port Hub has basically asked for 4 committees, if I have the math right, 7 different funds and 6 different plans. That's lots of big asks there, and I want to be able to address that. Start to pick down that list and see what the appropriate places for those kinds of recommendations, to see which we can accommodate. And I also want to be able to be realistic with the community about what's possible and what's not possible, what we have jurisdiction over and what we don't. And for me, something that's hard to always have a hold of is that we often consider this project to be a 3-part project. We consider the federal part of it offshore, and we consider We consider the Humboldt Bay a manufacturing of the a big part of it, and we're also looking at the third project being how we're gonna transmit, those gigawatts that are created, and somehow in sort of subdividing that project, it's not always entirely clear where the community benefits happen and who's on the hook for it. You've tried to bring some clarity for us to us tonight about that, but I still want to just watch that, have a better handle on that, because I believe that we are in the middle of a cultural revolution, and we're in a time when we're asked to plan differently and think differently. And and I know that tribes have not only concerns about MMIP, but real concerns about unceded ocean, as well as terrestrial lands. And I want to make sure that we are not just colonizing offshore, from the viewpoint of tribes, and that, I look at past industries, and I look at, tribal members getting jobs, and we have a labor agreement that's going to give first rights refusal to tribes, but getting someone a job is really different than generating multi-generational wealth. That goes beyond just that job. So I'm looking for just delving into community agreements as often as we can, as part of these updates. So I'll stop there.
As everyone saw, I mean, this deal has not come to fruition, and there are multiple moving parts, and so you can't determine what the ultimate community benefits package might look like, because we don't know what shoes are going to drop. And so I think we're doing due diligence and kind of positioning ourselves and also informing the community. And it's just like, this thing is a long train. It's going to take a long time. And so I think we're doing a good job. I think that our government to government consultations with the tribes is optimal. I think we're addressing their issues, and we're also ready to, address the needs of the community. But as you did say, the demands and have to be both timely and reasonable. And so it's and I will say that there was an article in the New York Times in the last 60 days that said that the escalating costs of offshore wind were chilling the desire of capitalists to invest. And so there's a balance point too, in terms of like, how much we can burden at each stage, because the profitability for different players is different at different levels. And the redirect for BOEM funds, when the companies pay the offshore leases, that's the big enchilada. That's when that money, 20% of it that goes to the Fed, could come back to our region. But I think at some level also, I've been on this board since 2008, and we've always been broke. And we have never been able to fully engage on our mission across the board. And some of our resources and assets have fallen into neglect. So I'm hoping that also that the district's needs and what we're called upon to do in our mission also gets full consideration by the public in terms of like how the resources are distributed. I think that's it.
Thanks, Patrick. Commissioner, nothing?
I started, remember?
No, that is way too long for me to remember. Thanks, Rob, for that. That was a good start. I think Commissioner Benson's got a point. We probably need to do this more often than not, and keep doing it. A lot of things to think about from a board standpoint, from a community standpoint. I think this board, this district, has done some crazy things in the last 15 years. I've been a part of at least one of them, maybe more. We took on the responsibility for a rather large contaminated site on the bay with a large amount of relatively toxic liquids. And we didn't want to do it. We as a board, we agonized over it. It was honestly one of the scariest times as a representative from a public entity. It was really scary, but it was the right thing to do, and we all knew it, and we did it because it was the right thing to do. And we put ourselves out there. We got called everything in the books. We were literally just called names, chastised every single meeting, every place I went, every person I talked to. I probably got thousands of emails, thousands of texts telling me what an idiot we were. Which I'm pretty used to that, and most of you guys probably aren't, but I am. It was still the right thing to do, and we did our due diligence. We did protect ourselves. We did listen to the community. We listened to all the remarks, all the input that we got over the course of 3 years. And ultimately, we did the right thing. We came out of that project with a project that I think is going to benefit this community and preserve the infrastructure that is there. And it's currently got more people working on the site than were there when it was a paper mill. So we're pretty proud of it. But my point is that we did the right thing, and we worked hard to do the right thing, and we did listen to people, and we can't always do it in public. We can talk about things in public, but we have to negotiate. We have to go through process in some sort of confidential status. And I know it looks weird. It's hard. It's hard to do that as a public. I see Natalie's here. County does this all the time. It's as a public official, an elected official, it's hard to do things without being able to talk about it. It just straight up is. And I see a lot, we experienced a lot of misinformation during that process, and we're seeing some misinformation during this process. We take the input, we take people's comments, we take people's letters and concerns extremely seriously. If you look at this board, you have a good cross section of white males in this community. Chubby white males. Sorry, Aaron, you probably don't include in that, but
Stephen isn't here.
Stephen's not here, so we can say that. But my point being, we do take our job very seriously, and we do take everybody's comments and concerns very seriously. So I won't say trust us, because I wouldn't trust anybody. But I do think we take our job seriously. I will say that. So that said, Rob, good presentation. I know you've been working on this a long time, very hard, and we have not done a good job of communicating that. So my commitment to you all and to the community is that we are going to get better at communicating this project and our goals and desires, and your goals and desires going forward. And so I said my little spiel. Thanks for coming tonight. And it's the first time we've had more than 3 people in the audience in 3 years. Okay, since we had a pulp mill. All right, so welcome. Next time we'll have water or something available in the audience.
You're not counting the warfare gear.
So now is we have all spoke. I would welcome you to please approach if you have something that you would like to say regarding this agenda item. Please approach the podium. Give me your name and where you're from, and 3 minutes.
The shortcut.
Why not go first? So I'm not intimidated by all the other great speakers here this evening.
Natalie's going last, so she can get it. She can just sit
Yeah,
down.
she'll put us all to shame. Rob, you're a great communicator, and every time I go somewhere, I'm Carla Osborne from Manila. I really appreciate listening to the details and you answer a lot of questions, and it's really a pleasure to have you explaining the project to us. So I wrote everything down because I don't do off the cuff. So good evening, commissioners, staff, and fellow community members. I'm a former Manila Community Services District member. Sorry, Carla Osborne. I live in Manila. I've lived there for 18 years. But I have frequented Peninsula beaches and bay, as well as Arcata Marsh since moving here to attend Humboldt State University as a wildlife management student in 1991. While this clearly is not about me, I would like to put a face to the community that we talk about when we talk about community benefits. So my family and I venture out daily to the scenic locations all around the bay. We like to hike, bird, kayak, take photographs. And while I live in Manila, I work in Arcata and I help care for an elderly person in Eureka. So I'm constantly circumnavigating our beautiful bay, and I love it here. What is constantly on my mind recently, though, is what happens to this amazing environment that we all live in if we don't get this right. And at the risk of sounding preachy tonight, I would like to respectfully urge commissioners and staff to step into this moment and think outside the box, to innovate, to take time for, this is not time for a business as usual approach. It's my hope that we, all of us, will do whatever it takes to look out for our communities and our amazing natural resources. My family and I are in full support of the Core Hub's efforts, and I know those efforts have been considerable to put together a comprehensive community benefits agreement that reflects the moment that we are in and the desires of those that live and recreate around the bay. We feel strongly that the CBA should be included in a lease and become a legally binding agreement, a document that whichever contractor ends up being chosen to develop the heavy lift terminal on the western edge of our beautiful peninsula is in agreement with our community vibe. If the CBA is not agreeable to Crowley, we hope that the district will move on and keep looking until we find a developer whose company ethics are in line with that of our community. If we get this wrong, it will affect the quality of life for those of us who live in proximity to the wind terminal port project and have reverberations throughout Humboldt County. Thank you for your attention and for all your hard work on behalf of the community and the beautiful bay we live near. Thank you.
I'm Lonix Landry, resident of Eureka, lifetime, right here with Chris. And I'm going to make a special report for President Dale, and that is thank you all for the service that you do in the department and the staff and the commissioners. Thank you for your work and efforts. I know you care about this community, and I feel that and appreciate it. You know we do too. And one thing I would ask for is your enthusiasm to support our community benefit agreements, and let's all do this together. Thank you. One last thing. What we're doing is flipping the script. Placing people, flora, and fauna before profits, and the profits will still come. That's it.
Hello, friends. I'm Natalie Arroyo. I don't get a chance to talk to all of you at once very much, but I'm here today wearing my favorite hat of all, which is Eureka resident. But I think you know I wear some other hats. So, one thing I'm struck by in this presentation, and every time I hear about this project and what's to come, is that this district had the vision to create a strategic plan quite some time ago now that laid out the vision of becoming a wind energy serving port, an alternative energy development, and serving that in a port capacity, which is really cool. And you didn't know how you're going to get there yet, because that was a while ago that was outlined as a goal, but you had this big picture that you were aiming for and set forth that vision, and then turn to when it came to implementing it, which is really incredible and impressive. So I want to applaud you for that. You know, you took something big, you were future focused, and you said, you know, we'll figure it out kind of as we go, how to get there. And you know, really, you're the only local agency. It's kind of humbling to be, you know, part of our local community, working hard for it, and to not have necessarily the say in a project of this size. It's really you that have the say. So you're the local agency that ultimately gets to decide how our bay changes with respect to this really massive project, which I fundamentally believe in, by the way. I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for us to generate energy in a new way and to support that industry and to do some great things for our community that haven't happened in a couple generations. I do believe that public commitments sooner than later to a zero emissions port, the protections for public safety, and you know, committing really publicly to your stance with respect to missing and murdered Indigenous people, and possibly even like a regional mitigation bank. I know that's been bandied about for quite some time, but as I was looking at your eelgrass needs, I was like, man, this feels like the time for a regional mitigation bank. So you know, publicly stating where you stand and taking a really strong position around those things is in line with that past action. Like, we're going to do this big thing. We're not exactly sure how we're going to get there yet, but I think the general public really wants to hear from you at this moment in time about how you're committed to these things, even if you don't know the precise path to get there. So, you know, in my experience, I know a lot of times people don't like to make like what they see as I don't want to use the word frivolous because that downplays the importance, but statements about something that seem like they're just values-based without exactly knowing what the method is to work it out. But I think the people that criticize that are the people who are often the least affected by them. So statements about values often really resonate with the people who I believe are the most impacted and you know, sometimes the most vulnerable within communities. So I think it's beneficial to make those statements and to keep making them more and more publicly as a board. I have a dirty secret, which is I really love listening to true crime podcasts.
Yeah.
Well, no, another time. I'll tell you about it another time. These projects really do generate danger for people, and so the flip side of that is, you know, just it's not meaningless to codify the agreements that you want to put in place and to put those into your contracts and to make public statements about them. So thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Rachel Smith, and I'm the program manager of Core Hub. I grew up in Humboldt County. My friends and family utilize this harbor for work and leisure. The impacts of this proposed development extend to all of us. I care deeply about this place and the people here, especially the groups who have historically not been protected and considered during times of economic opportunity. The role of Core Hub is to bring lots of different interests together to come up with an aligned set of priorities and move them forward together. The network is composed of tribal nations, local government agencies, educational institutions, labor leaders, community-based organizations, and residents. We as Core Hub do not speak on behalf of network partners, they represent themselves. We share the common interests that this network has developed together. We want to partner with the Harbor District to do this project right, in compliance with California laws and standards. My asks for the Harbor District. Will the Harbor District commit to responding to tribal nations and community-based organizations regarding the need for policies to prevent and respond to issues related to the MMIP crisis? Will the Harbor District sign a community agreement that addresses community needs and concerns as a requirement of lease approval and option to lease? As we raised in our CEQA comments, we need environmental review before the lease or before an option to lease that commits the Harbor District to a proposed project. Will the Harbor District commit to providing standing agenda items on community agreement negotiations at these meetings? We need a way for the promises to be enforced, so community benefits must live in the lease agreement and option to lease. I'm excited about the massive positive possibilities for this project. And so with that in mind, I asked the Harbor District to listen to their constituents and commit to doing this project right, to benefit and protect the environment and the people with accountability. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Bixler. I live in Arcata, and some of you may know I work with Peninsula residents, but I just want to be clear that I am representing myself and my own opinions and not anyone else. So I do support offshore wind in Humboldt County, but this project must be done right. I'm grateful that the Harbor District has applied for the mega grant that includes funding for a community benefits plan, but we also need a legally binding community benefit agreement. As you know, community members have been working collaboratively together to create a set of community benefit terms that could have far-reaching positive impacts for our community. And considering the history of our region, we cannot assume that development of a marine terminal will result in prosperity for our region and be a community benefit. It could be, but it could also cause severe damage. And I know this area has already been developed in the past, but you could create a gigantic wetland restoration project instead that would sequester carbon and create biodiversity and definitely be a community benefit. So I think we just have to keep in our minds that that is what we're choosing not to do. And we're doing this port project instead. So we just need to be careful moving forward with this project. If we're going to do it, we need to ensure that a robust community benefit agreement is in place. And I believe as a society, we need to ask more of our corporations who have profited from fossil fuel extraction than simply giving them an opportunity to transition their business from oil to wind. Even if we achieve the renewable energy goals of our dreams, we will still experience severe shocks to our social and ecological systems due to climate feedback loops and warming already baked into the system. In 2018, my professor in grad school told me that even if we were to turn off the carbon taps today, we would still see a 2-degree rise in global temperature rise, which would be catastrophic for our society. And companies like Crowley are partly responsible for the situation we are in. And I'm not interested in vilifying anyone. And I do want to work collaboratively as a community member with Crowley. But I think there's an ethical argument to be made over asking those who have profited from fossil fuel extraction to do more for the communities they are making money in. Crowley should invest in our community to help us become resilient enough to withstand the shocks that are coming. The set of commitments and terms we created as a part of the community benefits agreements, like a zero emission port, seed money for a steering committee, and a fund to help Peninsula residents address infrastructure needs would help achieve this. When we want a community benefit agreement term attached to the lease with Crowley to ensure these commitments are upheld. And thank you all so much for having us tonight.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Colleen Clifford. I'm a Manila resident. I've lived there for 20 years, and like Carla and some other people here tonight, we recognize the beautiful place we live. It is a very unique ecosystem. We've got the dunes, the ocean, the bay, we've got forests, we've got just beautiful trails that are accessible and peaceful, and like I said, unique. People fish, surf, kayak, they recreate, they commercially are involved in some of the jobs here on the bay. As a lifelong environmentalist, I support the transition to renewable energy. I also believe, like many others, it is so important to keep this landscape and community safe during the development and functioning of the port. So while developing the port in our beautiful Humboldt Bay, it's essential and appropriate to expect commitments from the developers that stand to profit from this new industry. Even the most green companies have the potential to cause harm and exploit the people, resources, and land of a community. Now is the time to lay out our expectations of how we want Crowley to move forward and integrate into the Humboldt region. We don't expect them to resolve all of our historic issues and challenges, but we do expect them to participate immediately in the ongoing efforts to address the needed improvements, as well as mitigate potential harms from the construction and functions of the port. There have been indications that local leaders have good intentions and they want to move forward with the best practices in good faith. There have been early communications that were friendly, though progress toward executing a community benefits agreement has been disappointing. The best indication of their good faith would be the inclusion of a community benefits agreement in the lease with you guys, the Harbor District. The lease is currently on track to be signed in December. So having the details outlined and memorialized in this legal document will show the Humboldt community that our needs are taken seriously and will be properly addressed over the entire scope of the project, which may be decades long. Recent alarming news about sexual harassment and sex trafficking at Crowley only enhances the urgency of strong community protections. As Rob pointed out, the MMIP issue is something unacceptable that Humboldt has firsthand experience with. And we bringing in a company with a track record of high-level executives ignoring and perpetuating the culture of sexual abuse while seriously addressing them before a lease is signed would be negligent on the part of local officials. We need that written down in the lease with this company. Furthermore, community benefits priorities have been established with various stakeholders through and local community networks such as the PCC, which I'm a member of, the Peninsula Community Collaborative. One example that Peninsula residents put forward was the Community Infrastructure Fund and Services Fund that would cover future investments in vital infrastructure and services such as transportation, recreational and outdoor access, health services, and childcare, among many other things. We are right now building the foundation of this multi-decade offshore wind industry, and we must consider the people that will have this project in their backyard, literally and figuratively. So we want to see the transition to renewable power. We see that this would be a wonderful thing in Humboldt. It could bring a lot of benefits on its own.
Colleen, wrap it up.
Oh, yeah. But we do want to recognize that it should be in the lease with a company that stands to profit. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mario Calson. I'm a resident of Manila. And Arcata High graduate of Humboldt State University a few years ago, before it was what it is today. Longtime resident and an angler, a sailor, a father of 3 kids, and passionate about the natural blessings that we have in our area and this life-giving planet. Offshore wind sounds like a must-have. Folks from politicians and environmental groups and environmental leaders are promoting as to our solution, effort to making real progress toward commitments to renewables. Whether the head of the terminal makes sense in Humboldt Bay is debatable. From my perspective, and it's a question of appropriate technology siting. Development of similar water pump with giant mass turbine towers, 1,000 feet above residential housing. It's going to cause a permanent change to the aesthetic and natural value of our bay. Industrialization increases the potential for air and noise pollution and risks to water quality. Navigation will be congested and constrained. The overall end result is a degradation of our quality of life, especially for residents of the peninsula, of Samoa, of neighbors of the new housing development, or of the neighbors of the development, the new housing development immediately adjacent to phase 1. There's some alternatives to consider. Coos Bay, 150 miles to the north, has capacity with similar investment for manufacturing and maintenance support of offshore wind turbines with similar investment from state and federal, different state, but we could still pursue our federal goals. Rooftop solar, perhaps simply smaller turbines or a smaller development footprint might fit with our aesthetic and traditional view of our bay as a natural resource. At a minimum, I'm requesting with respect, more transparency as this project develops. Renderings I've seen of the proposed 1,000-foot turbines are from an elevation which minimize the visual impact. None of the renderings have shown impacts from the vantage of a person standing in Eureka, on Woodley Island, or in Samoa. Show locations of the channel markers within the channel and realistically describe impacts to navigation. Show the proposals at low tide to highlight restrictions. I think you'd see more engagement from the community if we can understand the most severe impacts. Lastly, please support community voices. And I realize the urgency of our situation really requires new thinking and sacrifice. And maybe this is a sacrifice that we have to make as a community, but respectfully show us what potential impacts are. Thank you so much and appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Mario.
Hi, I'm Sean Marsh. I'm a business representative of International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I live in Eureka, been here for 25 years, and I represent a bunch of workers that are local in the community, their families. I originally was going to come up and talk about MMIP and Greenport. I see that in Rob's presentation. That's already on your guys' mind. You're thinking about it, and I appreciate that. The IBEW through Bob Dean, our business manager, co-signed onto a recent letter to the harbor from 350 Humboldt, which discussed the harbor looking at the UROC's courts. I think it was 16 mitigations for MMIP. And it's nice to see that you guys are looking at that, and I appreciate that, and I know that you're working. But it'd be nice to know which of those 16 points you think are doable and which aren't, and which we're actually working at so more communication there would be better. The climate change goals, the Greenport goals, it's nice to know that we're looking at it. But when we look at Humboldt Bay, as was also stated in the presentation, Humboldt Bay is unique. It's Humboldt Bay and Port of Long Beach. They're the two ports that are going to do this. And Port of Long Beach, they're going for it. They're world class. They're going green. They're going 100 zero emissions, not only for the port, but years down the road, all the trucks that are going to be bringing stuff into the port as well. It's all zero. We could be world class. We could do that same thing. We're one of the two spots. So, driving towards that world class seems like something that we could do. And so more communication is always better. We heard from some of the comments that there's misinformation out there. That's due to communication, So if there's misinformation, that's growing in the vacuum of not enough communication and specifics that the community is asking for. People are coming up and they want, specifics about commitments and enforceability of commitments. When we're talking about the lease, we're looking for parts of the lease that are going to accomplish some of these community benefits. And there are pieces of the community benefits that are up here too. So we see that you're working. Appreciate the work, really. It's great. But we should focus on being a world-class port, and that's not just in the zero, it's not just in the MMIP, it's also in the communications process. So let's be world-class in communication as well. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, my name is Cody Freitas. I'm with the Operating Engineers Local 3. I wanted to come up and talk about the Core Hub group and the diversity and the multiple voices that they bring to the table when they come and talk to somebody, that they're extremely inclusive and who that they have brought on as experts and to discuss matters. And that group being involved in this can lead to a partnership with Crowley moving forward if a CBA is included and fleshed out and lives in the option to lease, that the whole community can move forward toward the same end goal. We want a sustainable project, and we want a sustainable project to lead to a sustainable port. So that'll be the impacts, minimal impacts on the residents out there, and just sorry about that. I forgot my notes. Yeah, but we want a sustainable project. We want that. We don't want wind to just come through, and then we're left with the same boom and bust cycles that we've seen in the past. And if we do it right the first time, it's always cheaper to move dirt once. It's always cheaper to build it once. If we're proactive about how the site is addressed for MMIP, then we don't have to go back later and rerun conduit, install cameras, change site design. We can have that taken care of from the beginning. And that saves money in the long run for that to get reinvested and to go back to the community. And just a CBA in the optional lease or in a lease would keep the whole community moving forward towards a successful project from the very beginning and just hopefully smooth sailing from there on out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Robert Hempstead. I'm a resident of Arcata, numerous hat wearer, small business owner, also vice chairman Trinidad Rancheria. I appreciate the presentation. It was very thorough. I think it touched on a lot of topics that arose during the misinformation or lack of transparency that a lot of the community had issues with, or the outcry that was heard. So I think that's well receptive. It has a lot of information in it. And as you stated, you go to the website, navigate that. There's so much more to learn, definitely. For what I would have to say, I guess my topics, everybody else kind of took the lackluster from me, all the information, but I could reiterate time and time again, MMIP, and, you know, just really think about that. Really consider putting the CBAs in the lease. I know you guys have your jobs to do, and I know that the community economically driven needs this development. I would like to see, I'm in favor of renewable energies. I would like to see stuff go through, but it needs to be right. And it's not my place for my ancestral descendancy to go beyond Little River and tell you guys this is what you need to do on these lands. That's up to WEOT people. And it would be my job to meet with brothers and sisters and help support them in their needs and what their goals are. But for me as like a vice chairman at Trinidad Rancheria, I would support this. I appreciate you guys reaching out and meeting with us and meeting with all the tribes and having that thought process and asking, what do you guys want in terms of how can we go about doing this in a good way? And that was very important to us. And so we do appreciate that. All the tribes appreciate it. And I think just to be able to ensure that this is done, reiterated again in a good way, where we're not going back and having issues later on from a CBA after a lease was done. It would be nice to have that incorporated in it. MMIP always. And just thank you for the transparency and stating you're going to start having the meetings more again. And that will, or more, I guess, to help with information, local information, and whatever you guys can comfortably release outside of the negotiations that everybody that you all will be involved in behind closed doors. I know that's how it takes place and that's how it has to take place, but whatever you guys can release to the community, I think will help with the knowledge or help the educational purposes, and the updates on the website would be great too. But just keep that in mind. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
We are major supporters about.
Good evening, Carrie Venegas, Changing Tides Family Services. We are one of the community-based organizations that supports families, just so you know where we're coming from. Thank you for the presentation. I'm one of those government geeky nerds that I wish there had been more time, because there was a lot of information that you sort of had to sort of whoosh through. So because this is a public document, I'm looking forward to reading it off of the website, particularly more about the community benefit side. I would like to say that I think it's really important to understand that the word reasonable is a pretty loaded term. And especially when you come out of an indigenous community like I do, or our tribal nations, the definition and concept of what should be considered reasonable varies a lot. And some of that history about being reasonable is pretty horrific. So I want to recognize that the transparency and the effort to acknowledge things, to work on these things. But let's talk about what reasonable means and why, from the community's perspective, there are things we consider to have as reasonable asks, not excessive asks. And I think we've been pretty specific, especially coming from the core benefit side of it. What are the things that matter at this juncture? I've also read the resolution. Thank you for referencing that. Again, as a government geek, love to read resolutions. I do see that there's language in there that defers to the county to take the lead on the negotiations and the communication and the collaboration with community and community benefits, tribes, other interested parties. I would really urge you not to completely abdicate, because you have a very unique opportunity with this lease in this moment that is not just the county driving the process. You have your own decision making. And I'd like to see that be a core component of what you embrace and do. And with respect to that too, I'd like to make the distinction between what happens with a grant program and what happens with a binding community agreement. They're two mechanisms. They're really great mechanisms, and they're really great together. Think of them as the Reese's peanut butter cups. You want both, right? So that's what we're really asking for. Grant programs have their own sort of short life. They have lots of restrictions. They can present a lot of false equity too. The thing about grant programs is they're only accessible to those oftentimes who know how to access them. And someone at the end of the day has to decide who it is that gets grants. So there's going to be a lot of decision making. And that's where you need that community voice. So a community benefits agreement, particularly if it's included in the lease, becomes a binding, enforceable commitment. It's not dependent on grant funding. It's not dependent on what ifs. It's actually there. And that's really the bottom line for where I'm coming from as a community-based organization, looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, wanting to see that particular piece. So thank you again. And I have to say, love the joke about the homogeny sitting here. And by the way, I don't think chubby. I think experienced.
Thanks, Carrie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jana Gagnon. I'm the Sustainability and Government Affairs Director for the Blue Lake Rancheria Tribe, one of 3 Wiyot area tribes, in addition to the Bear River Band of the Ronerville Rancheria and the Wiyot tribe. I just have a short comment about a topic that hasn't been raised so far, and I didn't see it in the overview. And that is the order of operations around CEQA review. So the CEQA process is meant to be a robust environmental review. You've heard from other public meetings and in written comments that the preferred option stated by many, including the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe, is to complete CEQA before any option to lease or lease is signed. The legal merits of that argument are still under review in various sectors, but the optics of doing a comprehensive environmental review prior to giving the perception of a commitment to any particular project are far more favorable if we do a robust review first. So I just wanted to bring that up and just to sort of clarify that that is the way that the tribe is viewing it. There are a lot of people that are not here tonight that are really interested in giving their input, including tribal members. It is, as you may know, hard to find capacity to engage in these processes. And if we have to engage in an EIR for a $700 million to $1 billion project, in addition, at the same time as we are now, starting to look at options to leases and community benefits within those leases, there's a lot to undertake. And if we can do those things in sequence, according to proper interpretation of CEQA, I think that would be the most beneficial way to do it. So just wanted to bring that up to you. Really want to thank you for all of your hard work. We know from experience this is not easy. When we started to build the microgrids, we weren't at all sure where the technology was headed, where the economics were headed. But we knew enough to future-proof for a world-class project. And today we have that. And I urge you all to do the same with this amazing opportunity that's before us for port development. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Hello. Hi, Pat. Jennifer Kalt. I don't know if you heard, Humboldt Baykeeper is now Humboldt Waterkeeper. So I am the executive director of Humboldt Waterkeeper now. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the core hubs list of terms of things that we as a group are calling for is a list of things that so many different people in the community support. You know, you have here tonight labor representatives speaking about MMIP and tribes speaking about a zero emissions port, and lots of people from the peninsula community speaking for both human safety issues and environmental protection, you know, including having a zero emissions port from the beginning, not as a transition, not later down the road, but to start with. And the reason that we have all these people speaking in support of the things where we all agree we really need this. It's not just a laundry list of they want this, they want this, they want this, they want this. Let's put it all together in a Christmas tree and see what we maybe could get grant money for. These are things that we have all spent a lot of time talking about and realize there's broad agreement about. And the way we've done that is by listening to each other a lot. And I listened to a lot of this meeting on the phone because I couldn't make it here. And I know that there were at least 16 people on Zoom. And I heard what some of you said about really caring about public input and the community's input, and how there's, you know, a lot of questions. People have a lot of misinformation. I want to make a plea to you for all those people who couldn't be here tonight to please restore the ability of the public to comment on Zoom. This is so important to get more voices and to get more people listening to each other in the community. And I remember when you decided to not have that ability anymore and people had to come here in person, and you had like sometimes one person in the room, and then there'd be a bunch of people watching on Zoom thinking, well, gee, I wish I could be there to say something, you know. But the reason given was that if the Zoom feed cuts out, you have to shut down the meeting. And I'm not sure, you know, where that idea came from, but the county has a disclaimer on their agenda that says people can participate in Zoom, but if the internet goes down, you might not be able to participate. And if you really want to get your comments in, the best way to do it is in person. But to just eliminate the possibility of letting people express their opinions over Zoom, like I think all other agencies do. I don't know of any other agency that doesn't allow that. Even the Regional Water Board allows Zoom comments now. It's just so important to project to the community that you really do want to hear people's input. I know that you want to hear from us because I know all of you, and I know that, but a lot of people don't. They've never been to a meeting. And so just, you know, signaling that to the public that you really want to hear from them would help a lot in the transparency and increasing communication. Did I not speak for 3 minutes yet?
I gotta tell you, Jen, I didn't push the button. For 15 seconds. I'm sorry.
I really thought
She's special. And I really wanted to fast forward it. I just don't know how.
Take it off next time.
Yeah, you'll get dinged 15 seconds next time you talk. Anybody else care to comment on this agenda item?
It is.
All right, well, I was doing it. Good evening. Thank you all very much. My name is Louis Neuner. I'm with the Environmental Protection Information Center. I want to thank you all for all the work you've done on offshore wind thus far. I just actually one quick comment, and that is in one of those packets, you did not include surfing in the recreational grants capabilities, and I would like to point that out because there is a lot of activity that actually I just got out of that includes inside the jetty line. So I would highlight that. That being said, no, that's not. Thank you. But yeah, somewhere in there we noticed it. First off, I want to encourage you all. We talked a lot about transparency, and transparency in the CEQA process. We need to meet the urgency of climate change, and in order to do that, I think I do actually think we need this port at some point. That being said, I want to urge you all to build out transparency in this process, because if we're going to make it happen, the public needs to be involved to the greatest extent possible. Core Hub has done an amazing job doing just that. As a community, we have environmentalists, we have tribal nations, we have labor. Everybody has come together at a table and come up with a list of really immaculate terms that have actually captured a great deal of what the community desires, and I think that you all as district commissioners would be well off considering those to the greatest extent possible. As an elected body, I do hold you all accountable for fighting for us as people and as your community, and so and also ensuring that we benefit to the greatest degree possible. There are no-brainer stuff. The MMIP terms, I think those are like doable. And even if they're hard, like if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? And I think you all are in a position to kind of lead the effort on all this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. And the surfing.
Thanks, Louis.
Thanks, Louis. Anyone else care to comment tonight? I thank you for all the comments. Rob, thanks for the presentation. This was informational. So I received the report. We received public input. I should say. So we're going to move on.
Can I just ask one thing?
No.
Good.
Pat, okay, Pat, go ahead.
I believe I asked you this earlier today, is that we don't have a copy of a list of things that you have. I mean, we've internally have asked this. I've asked the board, where's this list? We don't have a list. Give us a list. I mean, I keep hearing this over and over and over again. I've heard it for months and months and months, is that there's this list. We don't physically email us, send us a copy. I don't have it. I'm not being negative. I apologize. I'm just saying, I don't have a list. I do not have it in my files. I've looked and looked and looked. I've asked the board, could you give me a copy of the list? Please just give us a list. It's so we can have a clear understanding of what it is that they ask us. Thank you.
I do think also Carla sent a list to Greg Dale just last night as well. So I'm sorry if those haven't been shared with you.
And that's yeah, it's public comment, but it's more than that. Patrick.
This might not be politically correct, but we haven't the authority to lead on the MMIP issue. And we are engaged with the tribes and we're learning of these concerns and we understand that this is a pervasive problem that's really unacceptable. But to try to put us into a lead on MMIP, then we have no authority, is not something that really should be expected or is appropriate. We will take the steps that we can, given our authority, to help the community deal with this issue. But the other thing is our contractor or potential leasee Crowley has in public, due to social pressure, made very explicit concessions. And if the community gets those concessions in writing, it's not necessarily a panacea to go to other port development interests. They're all large multinationals. And so you have leverage with Crowley because of the pressure that's been put on by the community. And that's the question. It's like, will they meet the standards that they described? And so then that is something that they need to work with the community on as well. So I hope that wasn't out of order, Greg. Those are my thoughts in the moment.
Thank you, Patrick. So I'm gonna move on. We typically don't respond to public comments. We just go about our business.
Well, and CEQA is a serious law.
I'm gonna
and
move on.
We're complying with it, and the process of scoping was open, and so that's something that's gonna be fully considered.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. I'm moving on to item B, consider approval of cooperative agreement with Caltrans to jointly develop an eelgrass master mitigation project.
Thank you, President.
You guys don't get to leave now. Stay for the fun part.
This is actually related to the wind project.
I made a motion during the motion.
You made a motion?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. You guys can't leave.
I thought if we acted fast enough, we'd hold more of the crap.
All right, this is, look at this. It's a cute picture too. That's not Humboldt Bay. Is
I can't tell you.
it's not. Go ahead, please.
Is that a beaver?
Is it the wrong color?
No, there's no sea otters. River otter.
Huh.
That's a sea otter.
I don't know where that picture came from. I really don't. Yeah.
Oh, great, good, all right.
All right. So this has been underway for quite a while. And this is a modified version of a presentation given in the Coastal Commission this past September. No, a year from this past September. So we've been working on this for a while. Staff recommendation is to approve this cooperative agreement with Caltrans and authorize district council to make non-material amendments to the agreement as may be required by Caltrans. To authorize the executive director to execute the amendments and contracts based on the terms, and direct staff to bring the final agreement back to the board for public disclosure. So since this is an agreement between the district and Caltrans, the district's going first. So Caltrans could try or could want to make some changes after you sign it. And so this allows us to have a process to bring it back to you. Just a quick summary, District and the Caltrans developed this cooperative agreement, which is based entirely off of our cooperative agreement for the Spartina eradication project, by the way. So you've signed a very similar agreement with Caltrans recently. That outlines terms and conditions for the district to manage special studies needed to complete permitting design for a master eelgrass mitigation project. The project's intended to mitigate 2 development projects being pursued by Caltrans and several other development projects pursued by the Harbor District. The agreement states that Caltrans will fund these phase 1 studies in exchange for the right to utilize a portion of the overall eelgrass mitigation project on the district controlled property. So it's they're funding the studies in exchange for access to land we control kind of deal. The agreement also explicitly allows for amendments so that the agreement will eventually include Caltrans paying for the permitting and design of all of the master eelgrass mitigation and their portion of the construction costs. So why do a joint mitigation strategy? Projects that impact eelgrass, the Harbor District, we've got 3+ projects. I'll show you a map in a moment. Caltrans has got 2 of them. 1 to 3 mitigation areas to mitigate for the collective total of those projects is our strategy. 1 comprehensive set of permits and 1 SECO document to cover all of it. And 1 5-year monitoring period. That is our strategy. The alternative is your standard procedure. So we're trying to think big here. The standard would, each one of these 5 projects would be analyzed separately with independent studies. We'd have 5 different sets of permits, 5 different sets of CEQA documents. Each project would have its own respective mitigation areas constructed separately in discontinuous locations at different times, both geographically and temporally separated. And then each mitigation area would have its own standalone monitoring periods. That is not our strategy. So there's ecological benefits to doing this all together. It'll end up being a larger restoration mitigation project. Bigger areas are beneficial from an ecological perspective than smaller areas. The combined mitigation areas have larger contiguous habitat areas rather than several smaller fragmented habitat areas, which is demonstrated to be beneficial. And then larger contiguous mitigation areas have a lower probability of failure than smaller areas that are alienated from one another. And eelgrass mitigation projects in Humboldt Bay have a continuous history of failing. And the experts are saying it's because they've been disaggregated from one another. So aggregating these projects helps increases the chances of overall bay-wide eelgrass abundance. One thing I am not covering in this presentation is the value of eelgrass. And I'm not going to talk about it, but if you want to know more, I can tell you. Benefits to regulatory agencies to joint mitigation. So the agencies, there are a lot of agencies that are going to have to issue permits for all of this. Reduces time and demands on tribal governments and regulatory agencies. All of the tribal governments will have the right to review all of these permits, so it saves them time. There's improved efficiency for the regulatory process. This is consistent with the Humboldt Bay Eelgrass Comprehensive Management Plan that was adopted by the board years ago, and it lowers the historically high regional failure risk identified in the California Eelgrass Mitigation Policy, issued by the National Marine Fisheries Service in 2014. It also has cost and efficiency benefits, which are obvious. Cost savings allow both agencies to expend more funds on restoration and conservation. So this would be far more expensive if we did it as 5, 6+ independent projects. The money we save, we can do more restoration and conservation. All right, so here's the development projects anticipated to have eelgrass impacts. Harbor District, we've got the wind terminal project and a couple of phases there. King Salmon Fisherman's Channel maintenance dredging, and then operation, maintenance, dredging, and repairs for existing waterfront infrastructure. I'll show you a map. Caltrans projects, there's the Samoa Bridges seismic retrofit and the Eureka Slough Bridges replacement. So here's a map of all of that. So the bridge over by Target, the Eureka Slough bridges of Caltrans, they are seeking to replace those bridges, the ones that come in and out of Eureka. That will have an impact on eelgrass. Years ago, they did a seismic retrofit on the bridge between the 2 islands. That impacted eelgrass. They mitigated for it. That mitigation failed, and they need to re-mitigate. Then the Harbor District, we've got our wind terminal project there, which looks like that. Our long-awaited King Salmon Fisherman's Channel maintenance dredging. And then this dashed line has an awful lot of marine infrastructure in it. And this master mitigation project would allow for mitigation or allow for impacts to eelgrass for operation and maintenance of existing projects within that dashed line. I probably should go through this pretty quick. There's too much detail here, but just quick math. The various projects and their estimated minimum and maximum impacts in acres of eelgrass. And these are older numbers, so don't hold us to these. This is the general order of magnitude we're talking about. On the left, you've got the collective total of the estimated impact minimum and the estimated maximum on the right. and in pie chart form. What we're talking about doing here is a risk apportionment strategy, which is really unique. So here's a bad map of Humboldt Bay. Here's our comprehensive mitigation area. The project could be set up such that Caltrans has that portion of the mitigation area and that portion, and then we have these portions here. But that's a terrible way to do this, and it's the standard way to do it. And the reason it's a bad idea is because if that portion of the mitigation fails, then each one of the projects has some relative proportion of its failure to deal with. Or if the failure is over here, it's a different story. A better way to do this is for it to not be geographically assigned responsibility, but rather a risk apportionment strategy so that the projects are listed in sequence of their risk. So the projects at the top have the least amount of risk, and the ones at the bottom have the most amount of risk, and each one represents a proportion of the total mitigation area. So the project, if there is failure, the project at the bottom is the first one to suffer. And if it is so much failure that you can't do the bottom project, then it goes up to the next project, and you keep working your way up the list. So here's an example of how that could work. You've got the projects in your hypothetical area of impact, and then the mitigation area. So that's the impact times 1.2. So the hypothetical area of joint mitigation is, say, 30 acres there. And after 5 years, if you have an 80% success rate, so 20% of the mitigation area fails, you end up with 22 acres. Which means that not every one of the projects can get the full mitigation that it needs. And the one that really hits it is the bottom one. So the operation and maintenance project would only be partially mitigated for. And so you'd only have effectively a bank of 0.3 acres of mitigation for that last project, but all of the other projects are fine and already fully mitigated for. However, if you have a 50% failure rate, then the operation and maintenance project just can't have any eelgrass impacts, and the king salmon's fisherman's channel is only partially mitigated for. And you keep working your way up that list if you have a even more extreme failure rate. And so I think I have an example here of 31% failure rate. With the size and approach of our mitigation project, we're expecting a 60 plus success rate percent. So 60 to 100%. So we're feeling pretty confident, but there's the various percentages that you would have to achieve for each project to be fully mitigated. And I know that's complicated. Then there's also the year in which the impacts are scheduled to occur relative to the mitigation installation. And so we wouldn't even attempt to do the operation and maintenance project until 6 years after the mitigation is implemented. So if it's 100% successful, then we can do all of the operation and maintenance that we are scheduled for. But we would know well in advance of the degree to which that project is viable. So a copy of the agreement between us and Caltrans was provided to you. Here are the terms of the agreements. I'm not going to read all of these unless you'd like me to. Here's the second page of that. Effectively walks through how much the Caltrans is going to pay us, the payment schedule that we can draw funds ahead of time, and here's staff recommendation again.
Thanks, Rob. Any questions, comments from the board?
Yeah, I got just a couple of questions. Thank you for that presentation. It's very exciting to see grass thriving in Humboldt Bay, so important for crab fisheries and black bass and so many species. Is the monitoring period 5 years, 10 years in perpetuity?
7.
7 years. And what is failure mean according to this plan?
According to the California eelgrass mitigation policy issued by National Marine Fisheries Service, that's well defined. I don't have it exactly memorized, but it's a certain density of viable eelgrass over time.
And does it differentiate between the native eelgrass and the Lorastor japonica, which is the invasive eelgrass? Is it all eelgrass?
All native.
All native. Difficult. Okay. it's difficult to tell them apart and work with them when they're intertwined like spaghetti separately. Okay, just was curious about that. Does it say anything about the report about, is there any blue carbon goals associated with establishment of eelgrass? I know that there is with the Spartina project, but is that also one of the considerations for eelgrass?
So just to be clear, so I understand your question, when you say report, are you talking about this agreement? Or the California?
I just mean in the plan, in the mitigation plan. It's a separate document. Maybe I should read that. So
Yep. So right now there is no plan. There is no document. There's the California eelgrass mitigation policy established in 2014. What we're talking about here is signing an agreement with Caltrans to begin studies so that we can do permits and write a mitigation monitoring plan, but there is no currently a plan.
okay. I was misunderstanding then. All right.
I want to laud the effort to combine these permits. There is a huge inefficiency if they were to be processed separately. And the more we can hit the ground with and less is kind of tied up in, repetitive studies, that's far preferable. So I laud the effort and I think it's good if other projects move in this direction.
Great presentation, and I hope the mitigations are successful.
Really great idea. I think it's looking outside the box. I hope everybody's on board to do it. I think Keith and Wayland are pretty astute people to have on board doing this. I'm glad Caltrans is a good partner. We'll see. It'll be interesting. And Japonica and Marina are not hard. They don't grow in the same elevations. So in Humboldt Bay, we don't have them together. Anybody from the audience care to comment? Hold on, let me get my timer out.
Yeah, don't forget, I'll just keep going and going. I should have. Yeah, I think this is an interesting idea. I mean, I don't know what the other agencies will view it as, but I agree that Merkel and Associates are great. They're the top-notch eelgrass experts, and this Caltrans mitigation for the Samoa Bridges retrofit. This was adopted in 2002, so yeah, it would be nice to get going on this. I know one of the big problems is where to find, sites that are appropriate, but one question I had, I know you don't like to answer audience questions during public comment, but the operations and maintenance part of it, my understanding is that once you mitigate for eelgrass impacts, you don't have to keep doing that every time. And I don't know if that's referring to dredging or what that is, but I think this came up some years ago when the Harbor District was looking to try to mitigate for eelgrass impacts from dredging the marina. And my understanding is you don't have to do that over and over. So
I'll nip that in the bud. Some areas have been mitigated, some areas have not been mitigated when the project was implemented. So some old projects have no mitigation for the impact.
So that would be operations and maintenance for projects where eelgrass was never mitigated for in the past?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Hello, Natalie Arroyo, Eureka. I wanted to comment on your board reports, but I'm gonna, since you talked about dredging here, I hope you'll permit me to talk about dredging briefly. And just say that it's tangentially related to this. The County of Humboldt included dredging and coming up with better interagency solutions around dredging in our legislative platform last year. At the last minute, it was included, and I expect that it will be included again this year. And I wanted to share my interest in collaborating with you and other public agencies around the issue of addressing dredging needs. And obviously that would include mitigation needs as well. But if there's any way that we can be working together on that to address the challenges that you brought up in your board reports, please let me know. I'd love to be involved. Thank you.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Well, it's been so long. It's been
Which
such a
county-
journey.
Which county are you from?
I'm just a Eureka resident. Thank you.
Anybody else care to comment on this item? Seeing that, I'm gonna bring it back to the board. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I still will be looking to see in this plan some development of some kind of metrics for measuring blue carbon. I just think, that we're trying to become a climate change resiliency hub, with offshore wind, and also our conservation efforts also have a big impact on the amount of carbon that's sequestered. I just wanted to give the board an example. It's the carbon sequestration by removing Spartina. The difference between Spartina dominated marsh and native marsh is huge. It's a big pie slice. And native marsh, if you don't know it, it sequesters 210 milligrams of carbon per liter of soil. That's what the Arcata Community Forest sequesters. 0.021 milligrams. So it's 2 orders of magnitude. It's 100 times and then 100 times again more carbon is sequestered in our estuary.
That's 1,000 times, right?
Yeah, sorry, 1,000 times. And so it's huge difference. So if we're looking at climate change resilience and we want to sequester more carbon, obviously our estuaries and our bay is a super important place. So of course, we only have 4% of the estuaries left in California, and we have tons of forests. So proportionally, there's a lot of carbon that can be sequestered in soil and wood in the forest. But I just wanted to highlight how important that is. And I'm just curious about that with eelgrass. I don't know if that's been studied, so it may not be
It has, and there's a lot.
I'd like to see what that proportion of blue carbon is relative to eelgrass.
Okay.
Frank Shaughnessy's done a lot of work on that. Any other comments from the board? I have a motion in a second.
Just before we do that, just number 3 on the staff recommendation, it should say instead to authorize the executive director to execute the agreement. Not the amendment and contracts based on these terms. So if we can incorporate that into the motion, that would be great.
Yes.
Second approves.
Thank you for that, Ryan. Just.
It makes a big buzz.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, are you okay with that, Larry?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Well, it's gonna be Chris anyway, so. I have a motion in a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Please signify by saying nay. All right, motion passes. I'm moving on to item C, review and approve an agreement to stay loan and rent payment obligations between the Harbor District and the Humboldt Bay Development Association
So moved.
related to the Chase Community Capital New Market Tax Credit loan. I mean, you guys write this thing out. I gotta read it. Ryan, you could fix that, but. All right, take it away, staff.
Okay, so as you're aware, back in 2016, the Harbor District took out a loan, the Humboldt Bay Development Association took out a loan, which the Harbor District participated in to create improvements to the former pulp mill that you referenced earlier tonight. It was basically to do the restoration of the buildings and whatnot after the cleanup efforts. In any event, through that process, there were certain obligations made in which the Humboldt Bay Development Association leased the property from the Harbor District, leased it back to the district in both a ground lease and operational lease. And then there were certain financial covenants or commitments that were made to service the loan. All of those covenants have been made on both sides of the equation. The investment fund that created the new market tax credit loan has now been dissolved. And we're in a situation where through a put call agreement, the Harbor District now owns the debt. And the Harbor District is not interested in continuing to sublease and pay rent to the Development Association. And the Development Association is looking to be relieved of the financial obligations related to the debt. In this particular case, all of the goals of the initial agreement have been met. So because we have a full accounting on both sides of the equation, what we'd like to do is enter into an orderly dissolution of this arrangement. It takes a little more steps than just this. So what we're asking is a stay to be put in place. This is retroactive. And I believe it goes back to April 1, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, April 1 of 2023. The agreement would stand for as much as a year, but we think we could get it wrapped up prior to that. And this would allow for the proper and orderly dissolution of the leases and the loan itself. And so during the term of this, payments of rent would be stayed and payments on the loan would be stayed. So that's what we're asking you to approve tonight, is to approve this agreement to stay loan and rent payment obligations. And then we'll be taking this to the Development Association, should you approve it tonight, for the same consideration.
Thank you, Chris. I have a motion a second. Any comments from the board?
The new market tax credit was a tremendous success. It was a huge effort that was required of staff, and we had very capable consultants, and as a result, we have rehabilitated an area that now flourishes and supports a lot of. There's concern that we're going to be competing with private industry, but instead what we've done is we've developed the property so that private industry can be nested there, and it's a, you know, as Greg was saying, more jobs in the pulp mill, no smoke going over the city. I mean, I still remember when I was in the stereo business, some days coming into town with my shirt over my nose as an air filter. Didn't work very well. But now this is part of what helps our area thrive. And the Humboldt Bay Development Association, on which I served, could remain relevant in terms of continuing economic development on the peninsula. And back in 2008, Larry Otker got up at a Economic Development Committee meeting right here in this room and said, we could have more jobs in the pulp mill, but it'll be in business incubator. And later, Mike Wilson kind of said we should do that in aquaculture and innovative energy. And a lot of that has come to fruition. So that's a long-term vision, visualize, verbalize, realize. And, you know, if you have a vision that really is desirable, then you need to stick with it through the troughs and through the peaks. And Kafka said, those things that we've not attained are those things we haven't sufficiently desired. So I just feel lucky to be part of the Humboldt Bay Development Association. The first part of its mission is completed in terms of the new market tax credit, but I think it has substantial development potential remaining to bring more in over and above what the Harbor District can independently.
Thank you, Patrick. Any other comments from the board?
I just like to agree with everything Commissioner Higgins said, and be a really good thing to get rid of this redundancy in this final stage of this process and move on and hopefully keep the Development Association relevant.
I gotta tell you, 7 years seems like a long time, 7 years ago. And it has just absolutely gone by in a blink. Well done, you guys. Make it happen. I think there's a couple of things that this new market tax credit allowed us to do on that site. And that was another scary project, but it preserved a connection to the grid. It preserved an ocean outfall that you'll never see again in California. It preserved 200,000 square feet of warehouse space and a dock on Humboldt Bay with inlets. It preserved gas lines and water lines and infrastructure that is so important to this community, and it's hard to imagine building that today. I mean, it's even with this Windport project, doing what that project what we preserved with that project. This new market tax credits helped us. It also helped us with, I think we at the time had the largest array of solar panels in the county. And so there's a lot of things that came of this voodoo tax credit. If you don't know what new market tax credits are, you should study up on it. Tell me how you do figuring it out. Anyways, so I have anybody from the audience care to comment on this? It's pretty riveting stuff, new market tax credits. Ryan gets off on it. So I have a motion and a second. We've discussed it ad nauseum. And we have a motion and a second, right?
Yes, Aaron made the motion, seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, future agenda items. I think we should look into a proclamation on the golden rule. It sank here, it was fixed here. Did Jen leave already? Is she out there? Is she? Tell her to come back in.
And a free slip consideration.
Chair,
And a free slip consideration. I think we can donate a slip to the golden rule whenever it comes to town. Being as we sank it. I want to see Chuck here. With the golden rule. And then I agree that I think we should have. Is Chuck still around with the golden rule?
Chuck DeWitt.
Yeah, yes, he's still around.
He never comes to our meetings anymore.
I wonder why that is.
If we do a proclamation for the, thanks, if we do a proclamation for the golden rule, I would expect him to be here, clean shaven.
There are other
That's
golden
right, no
rule
protests, that's
reps around here. There's quite a few.
he's my-
It's not just Chuck, you know, you get widen your circles.
Rep.
Widen your circles beyond the
Oh, I know, I'm.
chubby white guys.
Thanks, Jen. But make sure that he knows that this is happening. Because I don't know if we
When,
have,
next month?
I don't know when we're gonna do it, but I'm pretty sure we have a proclamation for the golden rule already, but doesn't mean we can't update it.
Okay.
Um,
I'll send you his number.
oh yeah, okay, thanks. I think I have it somewhere. He doesn't know how to answer his cell phone, so.
I got him on Facebook.
And then I think we would like a monthly just update on the heavy lift terminal.
45 minutes each time.
I think you probably do it in less. Give you 8 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah, that'd be great. Anybody else?
Lump and smell. No, that's all right.
Well, we're getting there, but
Actually, long fin smell, that's our bugbear, that's where we can't dredge.
oh, we're getting there. We're getting there.
And we're getting the answers to the scientific questions.
It's more a regulatory process now. Okay. I think that we are done. I'm gonna adjourn this meeting. Have a good evening. Thank you all for coming. What?